Good morning. So we go to chapter 23, measuring inflation and unemployment. Measuring inflation and unemployment. We already know what inflation is, a persistent rise in the price of goods and services within an economy. That is inflation. And for unemployment, it means you looking for a job, you have the ability to get the job, you are willing to find a job, but there is no job available. That is unemployment. So today, we want to focus on inflation. And when we talk about inflation, there are a lot of items, there are a lot of terms that are attached to inflation. So we're going to start. The first one is inflation itself. Inflation is defined as the general rise in the price of goods and services across the economy. So there's a general rise. So as soon as price continues to rise in the economy, in terms of what we buy, in terms of goods, in terms of services, it's inflation. So that's the first one, inflation. A general rise in the price of goods and services. So within this economy, all goods and services within this economy continue to increase in terms of their price. If this happens, we call it inflation. Then we have deflation. For deflation, it is the opposite of inflation. What does the opposite of inflation mean? I mean, a general fall in the prices of goods and services within the economy. So when prices continue to fall, we call it deflation. So deflation is not really good for the economy because it's a disincentive for firms to produce because they're not going to make more money. Get the point here. Inflation is good because without inflation, we're not going to make profit. Same goes to deflation. Deflation is bad for the economy because when there's deflation, firms will not be willing to produce goods and services. Unemployment will rise in that economy. So most of the time, when there's economic growth in an economy, when the economy is growing, there's always inflation. Why? Because when the economy is growing, it means we have a lot of money to spend. Our aggregate demand in the economy would increase. So that means inflation is better off than deflation. I think we get the point there. There's inflation, a general rise in the price of goods and services, and there's deflation, a fall in the price of goods and services. So that takes us to disinflation. For disinflation, it means the inflation rate is falling. It's a fall in the inflation rate. So it is not the same as deflation. Deflation is a general price fall. But when it comes to disinflation, for example, we have inflation rate of 3%. And now it becomes 2.5%. This is what we call disinflation. Do we understand? Disinflation means the general price level, the inflation rate is reducing. That is disinflation. But for deflation, it means the general price of the economy is falling. I think we get the difference here. Yes. All right, thank you. So we go to hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is bad. It's not something good for the economy because it means there's high rate of inflation. So there's no percentage that we could talk about, but as soon as the inflation rate reaches 50%, it is considered as hyperinflation. So that means you used to buy for $2, now it is $4, or it is $3. So that is 50% increase. That is hyperinflation. But if you are buying for 2.1, 2.3, 2.4, it's still okay. But buying for 3 that you used to buy for 2, then there's hyperinflation because the increase is 50%. Do we get it, please? Yes. Then we have reflation. For inflation, I wrote, this is the rise in the GDP which occurs following recession. There's recession. What is recession? Recession means the economic activity of a country is falling within 2 quarters. That means the last 6 months and the next 6 months, the economic activity is in decline. So if the economic activity is in decline for 2 consecutive quarters, it means recession. So if there's recession in the economy and the GDP of that economy is increasing, we call it reflation. GDP is the output of the economy, right? We talked about that. So if the output of the economy continues to rise and there's recession, then we call it what? Reflation. Do we get inflation? Yes. The output of this economy is increasing, but we are in decline. We call it reflation. Then we go to stagflation. For stagflation, it means a period where inflation is rising when the economy is in recession. When the economy is in recession, it is expected that the economy is in decline. It is expected that economic activity will be falling. But if we are having high inflation rates during this period, then we call it stagflation. It means the economy is growing and the economy is not growing and there's inflation. If the economy is growing and there's inflation, it's fine. But the economy is not growing and there's still inflation, then we are in a terrible situation. Do we get it? That means we are stagnant. The economy is stagnant. There's economic decline and prices are increasing. When there's economic decline, it means people don't have money to even buy things. Unemployment would have increased. So how do we buy things now that are increasing? The prices are increasing, we don't have jobs. So we call it stagflation. Do we get stagflation here? The economy is in stagnant form. There's no work, economy is in decline, and the prices continue to soar. It's increasing. So if this happens, we call it stagflation. Any question about these terminologies? They're fine, great. Okay, we'll move on. So we have to measure inflation rate. If we have to measure inflation rate, we measure it based on what consumers buy. Because we are the one buying, yes or no? Yes. Good. So here I wrote, consumer price index, the CPI, it measures the price level and inflation. So when we are using the CPI, we want to measure what we buy last year with what we are buying, the same price, the same quantity we bought last year with the quantity of this year. That is what we call consumer price index. So look at what I wrote here. I said it measures the price level and inflation. The CPI attempts to measure how much money a household needs to buy the same basket of food at the same time the previous year. So what we are saying is this. We used to buy, for example, we used to buy bottled water last year for $5. So we bought 10 quantities of bottled water. That's 10 bottles of bottled water for $10 last year. So how much is the 10 bottles of bottled water this year? 10 bottles of water last year, 10. And this year, how much is it now? So maybe we used to buy it for $100 for last year.